Welcome to the Mid-Market Edge podcast, where we uncover operational insights for private equity-backed portfolio companies. I'm your host, Kevin Bonfield, and over the last 30 years, I've had the privilege of working with fast-growing entrepreneurial teams, helping them scale, tackle challenges, and seize new opportunities. On this show, we'll talk to industry experts and seasoned leaders who will share practical strategies to drive growth, boost efficiency, and create value in the mid-market. Get ready for an insightful, engaging conversation that dives deep into the real-world issues facing your business. Okay, I want to welcome Adi Klevit to the Mid-Market Edge podcast. Adi, it's wonderful to see you. And this is what's so exciting for me is this is the third podcast we've done, and this is the first time that I get to ask you the questions.
That's right. Hi, Kevin. It's great being here.
It's wonderful to see you. So Adi, you run an organization that provides deep process insights and SOPs for companies so that they can become more consistent and effective in the work that they do. Maybe you can tell me more about your company and the type of work that you deliver.
Yeah. So we create, document, optimize, and implement processes and procedures for fast-growing companies that are lacking consistency. And we also work with companies, with founders that would like to exit or sell. So companies that are going through a transition to extract that knowledge and document it, optimize, and implement, because that's really important. It's not just the documentation, it's also making sure that those processes are being followed.
Yeah, the document that is, or the process which is well documented, but the documentation is on a shelf and nobody looks at it, is not really as valuable.
No, it's not. It's really not valuable at all. And that's one of the conversations that I usually have with the client before they start. Hey, if you're not going to use it, there is no point in doing it, because the majority of our work, yes, I mean, it takes time. So the majority in terms of time would be documentation, but then it has to be implemented.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's fantastic. So you talked about it in terms of processes, procedures, training. To me, as I look at process, there's different levels of the type of process. One is maybe an overarching one. One is down to kind of training, documentation, and so on. Where do you operate in that process optimization world?
Yeah, so we have the three levels of process of documentation. So we have level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 1 will be the high level view of the department, the division, whatever we are documenting. Level 2 will be more the swim lanes and the flow charts and overall explanation of the process of themselves. And then from there, we break it down to procedures. So we actually do it all, depending on the engagement and depending what the client needs. So for instance, if we're working with a manufacturing company, an engineering company, which we've done several, they need work instructions, because if you're going to create a bill of materials or you're going to create something, you need to know how to do it. You need to explain to somebody how to do it, and you need work instructions. Let's say we're documenting a marketing agency, working with a marketing agency, that the work instructions of the specific software is not that important, but it's more the strategy behind it, the best practices. Why are we doing? So it will be a higher level. So we can adapt, and we do. And it depends on the industry, because we work with a variety of industries. So it's what's needed, but we are capable of doing all three and understand very well all three.
And what caused you, Adi, to get into this line of work? What's your background that says that process is the kind of thing that you can bring excellence to in this world?
No, I studied industrial engineering. That's how I started my career. And that's what I've been doing ever since. It's process documentation, process improvement in some capacity or another. So whether it was more on the management side, but it's still businesses need processes. And the way that I got into this niche is I was a general business consultant, and I was working for an international consulting company. And then I decided, okay, it's time to start my own business. And I had clients that followed me, and I had new clients, and I'm a very good strategist. So it was going great, but I knew that in order to implement and be successful, we need processes here. We need to train, we need to be able to optimize. And I would tell my clients, you need to document your processes. Okay, so it's week after week and nothing happened. And finally, I asked one of my clients, well, how about if I do it for you? And he goes, really? And I was like, yeah, because I was just like tired of not having it done. And I knew that that's, it's not going to work. So I did offer to do it, and I did it. And it was so successful that immediately he referred me to another person and another person. And then I realized I cannot do it myself. I mean, I saw that it's like, it's not a one person. So then it became an organization. It became a company. It became a group of people. And I have now consultants and technical writers. And we have all of our own processes that we developed throughout the years on how to do it effectively. And of course, now AI is a whole component into this whole situation, into this whole process. So that's the story of how it came about.
No, that's fantastic. Well, I'm going to put a pin in the AI piece because I think that's maybe a later on conversation, but we should come back to that.
It might be podcast number 4 because, we have to have the sequel and continuation.
Exactly.
We gotta put it there. Stay tuned for the next one.
That's awesome. So you talked about working with both founders who are in the process of either making their business better or thinking about some kind of transition. But you also work with private equity companies as well that have bought an asset and they're trying to work out what to do. So where do you spend most of your time? What's the conversation like when you're starting out, for instance, with a founder?
So with the founder, it will be more of a knowledge transfer of where the founder is stuck in the business, where the founder is needed or has the idea that they are needed or others think that they are needed, where are the decision points that they cannot move without the founder, where are the bottlenecks, what are the hats the founder is wearing that if he or she are not there is going to be a problem. So if they're not there, it's going to be a problem for the organization. So those are the points that the knowledge has to be extracted, written, documented, and then transferred to somebody else. And we'll help to figure out who that somebody else is and also train the new person. Also, it can happen when there are internal transitions. We just finished a great project with a big company in the food industry where the CEO was moving on to a different positions in the company. I mean, they have different companies, so they were moving to another company. And all that knowledge for the last 20 years had to be transferred and passed to the person, the predecessor. So
yeah, that amount of institutional knowledge that sits in one person's head and isn't written down can be it can be frustrating for a founder or a CEO, but it creates risk also for a company that's coming in and buying.
It is. It's a huge risk because you don't know what's going to happen. I mean, people can leave. People can decide that they don't want to stay. So it can be a problem.
So you talked about not just the documentation, but also the change. And I'm thinking about this CEO who's moving on, and I'm sure that part of it is just I don't want to give that up because it feels like I have control, or I don't want to give that up because I'm so much better at doing this than anybody else. So how do you go through the training and the letting them take their hands off the wheel process?
Yeah, so that's getting the buy-in, and we encounter that. We encounter that with a company where the person who was leaving was not willing to give all the knowledge because he was holding it. They had to negotiate a deal to actually get him to stay to give us the knowledge. So that's an example. There was another example where we were working with a bank, a small bank, and the person that was there for years and years and years, they had no motivation to participate in the knowledge transfer. That is the minority. The majority of the time, when people understand and they're part of an organization and they want the organization to succeed, the majority of the time, we don't have any problem with that. We get the buy-in, we explain what is it in it, what is there for them. So it's either the legacy is continuing, or perhaps, they want the peace and quiet that they're not going to be asked those questions all the time because they didn't pass it on. They might, it depends what their reason is. And we talk, we communicate. We're very good communicators. And that's what is important to us, is to have that good communication with the client to really explain what the process is. We can't go in there and make somebody give us the knowledge. It just doesn't work. It has to be a partnership. It has to be a collaborative approach. And it has to be something that the person understands why they're going to get benefit from it. Because it can be a tedious process, to be honest. It can be, it takes time and it's asking a lot of questions, and it can be fun if somebody is interested, but if somebody is resistive, it can be pretty painful. So we had to take that resistive coat off in order to so for them to participate. And that's we always get the buy-in as the beginning, as the entrance to the project.
Yeah, the thing that I find fascinating when we get into process work with our clients, and we don't, by the way, we don't get down to the level that you do. The level of engineering that you do is something that we're not at. But the thing I find that fascinating is two things. Number one, having it written down, and I'm going to say on paper, but often today it's on screen, right? Having it written down is really clarifying. There are so many times where I've worked with clients where you look around the room and they go, "Oh, well, I didn't realize that was the way that we did that, or that was where the bottleneck was." So having it in one place is great. But then it opens up the conversation about what should it look like? How could we actually make it better?
That's right, because it does. And that is so important, especially in our changing world. And that's one of the things that I've been asked, well, why should I document my process if things are changing all the time? That's what I'm hearing lately in the last few months. That question comes in, and then that question comes about. And one of the things I realized is that there is that perception that things are changing all the time. But if you really look at it, they're not changing all the time. There are changes, but some things are stable and are staying. And that's what we have to document. So I'll give you an example. For instance, if we document the hiring process. So the software might change, instead of this screen, now it's this screen, or maybe you're using a different software. And I just mentioned it to my team today. I said, okay, what do we do here? We're not writing work instructions. Work instructions can be written by Scribe or by another software. It's fine, click that and click that. We're looking here at the strategy and the tactics too of how to implement the strategy. For instance, if we have an active job ad, look at it several times a day. What's happening? Don't just rely on the email notification. Or, if you have a position that is hard to fill, then post the ad several times or boost it. Those are the rules of how we boost the ads and how we look at different things. And then log into the screen where you have your active applicants, and then screen through it and then get rid of those that you don't need anymore or didn't qualify. So however it is, it doesn't matter which button you press, but the overall process itself will stay the same, whether the interface will change tomorrow or not in that particular software. And I think when we actually differentiate between what is stable and what doesn't change, then we can align and be more comfortable with the change.
Yeah.
I think that's the separation.
The way that you describe that, gosh, that's a fascinating one for me, Adi, because I'd not thought about it this way. But you're talking about connecting strategy to process, right? And so let's take the recruiting example that you just had. There's a discussion to be said about, is there one recruiting process or is there two recruiting processes, right? There's one maybe for this type of role, one for this type of role, and then the other is, are we trying to put a process in place to make sure that candidate is the absolute best candidate, or am I trying to win in the marketplace by being able to go through the process quickly and offer quickly, because that means that I'm going to get better candidates that way rather than going through the deep assessment? I mean, that's when you talk about connecting strategy to process, that's a completely different discussion, right?
It really is, but then it trickles down to instructions, because exactly what you said, one of the instructions is like, you have to jump on every lead that we are getting for that particular position, because otherwise we're going to lose to the competition. So that is strategy, but it's actually a tactic, because the recruiter or the person who helps source the applicants, when they read it, that becomes part of the standard operating procedure. They don't need to necessarily think about, oh, what's the big strategy here, but they do understand the why. So then there is an execution to the strategy. So that's why having a good strategy for that particular company is very important, because then we can take it and then we can write the procedure accordingly. So that is the difference.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. So when you come in and you start working with a company, do you mentioned the CEO who was moving on? Do you start with a position and move out, or do you start with how do you prioritize where you're going to work?
So for that particular example, the CEO was wearing multiple hats. So we process mapped. We basically process map it with sticky notes, the old-fashioned way, but we do it electronically, and we see what's in front of us. And then we always ask, what will give us the biggest return on investment? And return on investment, however you want to define it, I mean, obviously it's always the bottom line, but it's where right now, if we had well-documented processes and procedures, we will get the biggest solution, the best solution, the biggest return. And it might be that we have to start with an area where it's the low-hanging fruit, the easiest to do, and then we're going to get also buy-in from that area. So that can be the early adopters. We'll start there, and then they will show the rest of the organization that it's okay to have well-documented processes and do it that way. And it's a discussion. It's sometimes, it takes a little bit back and forth. There is a company that both you and I worked on, and it was a discussion because we needed to make sure that we're going to start with the area that is going to make the biggest difference. We needed to start also in a place where there is going to be the less resistance, if there's going to be any resistance. Also, another consideration was, this department has people that have been here for so long that on the other hand, on one hand, you can think, they're never going to leave. But on the other hand, if they leave, it's really dangerous. So you really have to assess the risk and decide, if it's all going to get done, it's a matter of months when we go from one to another. But if you decide we just want to start with one, so we assess the risks and we make a decision that way.
So you've talked about working with companies before they're owned by private equity. How is the conversation different when you're working with a private equity company that's just bought a new company, a new platform, and they're deciding what to do?
It is definitely a rush, because we were just doing a project with one that people were just leaving. And it wasn't a bad thing necessarily, because I did call the owner and said, hey, what's happening here with everybody leaving? And he goes, it's okay, because sometimes you have to clean house. Sometimes it's not the right match. Sometimes it's not the right culture fit. It's fine. It's totally fine. But you have to be on top of it, because you don't want to lose that knowledge. You never know what the knowledge is going to walk out the door. You might use it, and you probably will if those people have been there for quite a while. That's when you're buying a company, you are buying the knowledge, you're buying the people, you're buying the processes. If the processes are not documented, the processes are in people's heads, and that is where the problem begins and ends too, because that is a big problem.
Right. I mean, that kind of institutional knowledge, if you're in a position where it can just walk out of the door and you're not the founder anymore, you're the owner, you don't even have any of that kind of, context over the last 10 years to be able to say, I think I remember how to do that. You're starting from scratch.
Especially if you're not a technician. Like, let's say you take a company where the owner was also the technician, and he grew it to, or she grew it to, like a good size that they were able to exit. But if you're not a technician, now you bought a company, you have no idea how to do it. So you never can rely on, I'll go back and I can figure it out, because you can't figure it out, because that time is lost. It's like blank. It's like going, it's like, you're not there. You don't know. You don't have the history behind it.
Yeah. So, if you were coming into a private equity backed company that had just been bought, or they're in the middle of an acquisition and they're going to put two companies together or multiple companies together, how do you get started in that kind of engagement?
So those are different scenarios. When we work with all of them, we work with a company that was acquiring another one and trying to merge it. That was in the healthcare services, home care. So they grew by acquisition. So all of a sudden you're acquiring different software, different processes, different culture. So we have different approaches. And again, it really depends. It's very tailored to the company. So if they want to, if there is a main company that you want to absorb the rest, so then you have the processes for the main company, and then we more teach and implement and coach the other companies that are being absorbed. If you want to create a mix of everything, then we actually created a committee of different people from different companies, creating the different processes. If you have a company you just going into and you want to extract, then we map it and we start extracting and start interviewing the key staff that is there. So it all leads to the same approach at the end of extracting and optimizing and implementing, but it's different in terms of like how do you get started and who do you interview and who do you work with.
Right. So, and you mentioned early on about the new AI tools that are out there, like Scribe, to be able to track your workflow. Scribe is a tool where you track your workflow on a website, right? The work that you're doing online.
Yeah, it basically like you start clicking on things on the screen and then it creates screenshots and work instructions. You still need a human. I mean, we still go in there to make sure everything matches, but those are work instructions. Those are click here and click there. That is a level that we definitely provide services in that level, but we definitely take it above it always, because we need the scope and the purpose and what we're doing here and why are we doing here? How does it align to the overall strategy or the overall tactic of execution? What is so unique about it? We always try to get the uniqueness, because somebody could go, let's say you have somebody is out. So somebody can go into the tutorial for the software and figure out how to create a new customer, as an example.
Right.
But how do we create a new customer? What is our name convention? Who do you then notify? Who do you send information to? All of that. That is the institutional knowledge that you cannot learn on a tutorial. You have to have your own tutorial about it.
So you mentioned AI in general. How is that changing the work that, outside of the work instructions, how is AI changing the work that you do?
Well, we have more and more clients that are coming to us realizing that for them to implement AI and to automate and to create agents, they actually need to understand their process first, because we can't just create agents without having a process there. So what actually is happening is that we are working with more companies that are the AI consultants, because we are creating the processes before that, so then they can automate or create agents. And Kevin, this is how I started my career. My first job as an industrial engineer was in Salem, Oregon, in a Mitsubishi plant. It's not there anymore. It was, all the semiconductor industry in the end of the 90s. And my job was to do a time study and map the process so the software engineer can come and actually create the software. So yes, that was completely different technology, but it's still the same concept of we got to understand what the process is, so then we can automate it.
Yeah, I do think that people miss that as a step, because when you talk about, my experience has been, when you talk about, we need to document this process, the fact that there isn't a documented process often means that there are many people in the same company doing it completely differently. You're not actually documenting one thing. You're trying to understand what multiple people are doing with supposedly the same outcome.
That's exactly right. And in order to get consistency, you have to have it documented, because the AI will do it consistent. The agent, the automation has to be consistent. It's not going to be, today I feel like doing it this way, and then next day I'm going to feel like doing that way. No. And again, I want to go to the point that I get, things are changing so fast. And I don't know if you observe that, but it seems like there can be the phenomena of just basically paralyzing or not moving forward because of that whirlwind of change. But it's a conceived whirlwind of change. If you
Mm-hmm.
remain stable, if you remain doing what you're doing, you will be able to continue to move forward. If you get yourself swept away by the wind of change, you are going to feel all the time that there is change. So I really, that's from my observation, that's the difference between people that are succeeding right now and looking at the opportunities, and then people that are, well, okay, let's wait and see, or I'm feeling like things are constantly changing, so I'm going to do nothing for now.
Yeah, I do think that whole, like, everything is changing is a self-perpetuating thing as we relate it back to what you do, because there's so much, I'll talk about friction or vibration in a company, right? There's so much vibration because every time we run this process, it's done 5 different ways and it delivers a slightly different outcome. So I've got to go back and quality check it, or I've got to go and deal with the problem that it creates. And that's the change, right? It's just there's too much going on, rather than I've got this process, it's grooved, it delivers the same way every time, and now I don't have to worry about it. So the feeling of change comes down a lot.
It does. It creates that stability, and then you can create a process on how to deal with change. So yes, let's say we have a new software, or the software changes. We know, I mean, even a simple software like QuickBooks, I mean, they change the interface, and then you go, well,
right.
where do I look for my customers now?
Right.
So, but it's fine. But if you have a process on how to process change, and you have stable processes, then you can use that checklist in order to audit and change your existing processes.
Yeah, no, that whole discussion of how you get to stability so that you can actually be thoughtful about process change is to me is a big deal. And as you were saying, it's the foundation for being able to do the kind of work you want to do with AI.
That's right. That's right. And I think it's that hype is going away, or people are realizing they're just saying, oh, I need to automate, or I'm going to create agents. You say it, but then you have to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. And in order, those that walk the walk, they know what their processes are, because that's what they do. They basically automate a process.
Right. No, that's awesome. So let me come at it this way. You talked about starting your career in Salem, Oregon, in a Mitsubishi plant. If you were to take all of the things that you've learned over the last little while, let's say, and apply it back to when you first started, what would you do differently when you first started your career as a result of all of this great knowledge that you have now?
It's a good question. When I started my career in that particular company, it was very structured. I have very specific things that I was going to do, and I did them. And I thought that I learned all of it in school, and then I realized that I actually didn't learn all of it in school, and you learn from experience. So I think learning from experience and knowing that it's okay to have the experience and learn by observation, by repetition, by learning from others and having mentors and be inquisitive and learn, which I did, but sometimes you have those doubts of like, well, is this, but that's life. That's really life,
right.
And that's what I learned is when I actually listen to multiple viewpoints and seeing what's happening and learn new things and observe and make connections and meaningful connections and being out there and being willing to make mistakes and not know everything and go back and then try again. And that is knowledge that when you have that, you are able to be an entrepreneur and you are able to be a business owner and have that knowledge and certainty that no matter what, you're going to fall on your feet, even with a few bruises and sometimes broken bones, but you're going to do that and you're going to continue moving forward. I think that those are the lessons that I learned throughout the years.
Yeah, there are some people who would regard process work as being very dry, but this discussion around you've got to have it for AI. You can connect strategy and process so that it delivers the outcomes for your company, and at the same time, there's still that human expertise, experience requirement. I think is sometimes lost, and you've brought it back to life.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Well, Adi, it's wonderful having you on the Mid-Market Edge podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the Mid-Market Edge podcast. For more information, visit the Mid-Market Edge website at midmarketedge.com. Details are in the show notes. Remember to subscribe and like the show so you'll never miss an episode. And until next time, keep building your edge in the mid-market.